This is The Wall Street Skinny, a podcast devoted to exploring the financial services industry and making the world of Wall Street accessible to everyone. Hi, friends. Welcome back to The Wall Street Skinny. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are two lifelong friends with a combined 25 plus years of experience, here to give you the skinny on the world's highest paid jobs, and in today's special episode, to give you a sneak peek into what it's like being a woman at the helm of one of the world's most elite investment banks. And so today is the third in our three-part SALT iConnection series. We had the incredible opportunity to interview industry thought leaders like Anthony Scaramucci and Ty Wallach, and we've saved a very special guest for you for our third installment. Today, we're going to speak with Zoe Cruz, who was the head of the fixed income division at Morgan Stanley when I started my career as a summer intern back in 2005. She ultimately went on to become president of the firm. So get this, she was pregnant when she first started in the industry. So she navigated her entire journey, starting as a young mother, to the point where she was at one point ranked number 10 on the Forbes list of the world's top 100 most powerful women. And she also previously topped Fortune magazine's list of the highest paid women in the world. She has served on countless boards and advisory councils since she left Morgan Stanley. She started a hedge fund, a macro hedge fund, Elle Woods, right? Like it's hard, right?
Yeah.
And she is currently the founder and CEO of Menai Financial Group, which is a firm focused on the world of DeFi, or decentralized finance, if you're not familiar with the term, which we explained in our two-part intro to crypto series a few months back. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoe's resume and accolades, I really just can't stress enough to you how she was such a symbolic figure for me when I started my career. You know, seeing a woman rise to that kind of important position within an investment bank was something that had basically never been done before. And so she was really a trailblazer. I've been looking up to this woman since I was 19 years old. So to meet her now was not only like this really cool thing, but what's so amazing about her is she is still forging new paths in the industry decades later.
Yeah.
And beyond that, by the way, she's absolutely hilarious. She's a very, very straight shooter. We were so lucky to have her on. She shares her story. She gets into her take on the evolution of gender roles in the world of finance. And she also shares her view on the next big thing in finance.
Awesome. Well, why don't we get right into it? Let's bring her on.
Okay, so we are joined here by Zoe Cruz, who is one of the most, I think, legendary figures on all of Wall Street, frankly. As two women who started their career in fixed income at Morgan Stanley, you have kind of loomed large in our minds for the better part of 2 decades. Zoe, you were head of fixed income at Morgan Stanley when I started. And listen, I'd love if you could share just a little bit about your background and what it was like. You just mentioned that, you were already a mother by the time that you really started your career in the industry. I'd love it if you could just walk a little bit through your background and talk to us about what it was like being a true trailblazer as a woman at extraordinarily senior echelons within the industry in a time before that was relatively more commonplace than it was then, even if it's not commonplace now.
There are certain overarching principles as to how people get to where they get to. And you hear them pretty consistently, some better articulated than others, where, yes, of course, you need to be smart enough and you need to work hard. But those are table stakes. There are a lot of people as smart, if not smarter than I was, and I'm not going to be falsely modest, I was, that never got to where I got. So for me, it's actually luck. Being in the right place at the right time, and as importantly, recognizing the luck. So I'll come back to that, but my background is I'm a Greek immigrant. I was born and raised in Greece, and that in itself is a blessing in the sense that I internalized very early on. Once I came here, there are many different ways to look at an issue or to look at another human being because we're all products of our upbringing. So Greek immigrants, we came to this country 3 years before I got to Harvard on a full scholarship.
Wow.
Full scholarship. I didn't speak a word of English. And then 20 whatever years later, I was running Morgan Stanley.
Yeah.
Well, that world is basically sheer luck, recognizing your luck. But most importantly, I think when I say recognizing your luck is understanding if you happen to be, and I'll come back to Morgan Stanley, obviously, fast forward to Morgan Stanley. When you go into an institution, in this case, the career I started at Morgan Stanley was in investment banking. First of all, you need to understand there are rules of engagement in that company. You're not going to change that company. You need to understand if those rules of engagement are things you can live by, then you figure out how you can be helpful. Not I want, I need, I have to have. So before I went to business school, so I was romance, languages, and literature major in college. And I met my ex-husband, actually. He was a Nicaraguan, a very brilliant man. Ended up going to Lehman Brothers. But he had his entire life planned. He was going to be a JD MBA at Harvard, which he ended up being. He was going to join investment banking. He says, what are you going to do with romance, languages, and literature when you graduate? I said, well, I don't know. When I graduate, I'll figure it out. So in Boston, there was top 3 banks. New England Merchants Bank was one of them, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was bought by B of A. These top banks were hiring, in those days, young, talented people from Harvard and other colleges. And they had these management training programs where they turned literature majors to bankerettes, So I walked in thinking I'm going to go interview for the banking training program. And the HR person, this luck comes in. She says, you speak 4 languages. We have an opening in foreign exchange trading. You don't need 4 languages in foreign exchange trading.
Help, you can just,
but
you barely
she
need
says,
one.
do you want to interview for that instead of the program? I go, yeah, let me. So I walk into a trading room, and in those years, it was voice brokers that are screaming dollar yen, the prices. We had some of them even at Morgan Stanley at that time. And my boss-to-be, he's standing up, ex-football player. He's throwing his phone and screaming obscenities. I go, this is the job for me.
This is the place for me. Oh my God, this makes me so happy.
Yeah. So 3 years later, obviously a pretty steep, learning curve. I loved it. But already I recognized that although I learned a lot and it was interesting, this is before the world truly globalized, where capital flows were exploding. FX at that time was letters of credit. I mean, interesting, but not that much. So if you wanted a career in investment banking, which was the new thing, HBS is the place to go. So I applied to Harvard Business School. At that time, as a summer associate, I interviewed with 3 firms, Goldman Sachs, Salomon Brothers, and Morgan Stanley. Those were the 3 places at the time you wanted to be in. All 3 of them actually made me an offer, which is, again, making your own luck. The way Goldman made the offer is, if we were to make you an offer, would you accept?
That is so on brand.
Yeah, because they didn't want to have
Of course, they can't have a rejection rate.
Morgan Stanley, and this is what I mean about understanding the culture, the institution, the rules of engagement. Morgan Stanley, these old world bankers, they said, look, first-class business in a first-class way, that's what... You're not going to be a superstar just bringing a shady business and making money. And then Salomon Brothers, it was the good friend years with his cigar, and they were revolutionizing mortgage trading. It was the place to be if you wanted to do trading. It was one of those all-day interviews. And at the end of that, I remember leaving those rotating doors, coming out and breathing a sigh of relief.
Really?
There's no way excellent at what they do, not the culture I want. So I chose Morgan Stanley because I understood what's important to me, and culture matters.
Yes.
And frankly, even though the offer was made by corporate finance, and I do believe it's important, you can be a work. You can work in careers that are demanding and be a mother. They're not mutually exclusive things. But there are physical limitations. Investment banking, 90-hour weeks, no, you can't. And so although I knew I wanted to have a career, as I said, I got pregnant second year business school. I said, look, I accept the offer, but I want to go into sales and trading. And again, luck comes in. At that time, they were setting up a foreign exchange business, which in those years, investment banks did not do FX. It was all Citigroup commercial banks did FX. And so they were just getting in the business. So I basically started a founding member of the foreign exchange business in a very good firm that was mainly a private investment banking boutique on its way to become a global Goliath. Again, people don't link act and consequence, risk and reward. So the risk of being in a little corner where corporate finance, I mean, my classmates were having golf outings with, fancy investment banking clients. I'm sitting in a corner, tin desks, trading foreign exchange, which was a sideshow. In fact, for the first year or so, I said, what have I done to my career? But then, of course, foreign exchange, we became one of the most profitable businesses at the firm.
Right.
And if you're a founding member and you make a lot of money on a relative basis, you get to run the business. And then, of course, from running a global foreign exchange business, even though it wasn't M&A, it wasn't as powerful, not as glamorous, I was running a business that actually was truly global. Mm-hmm. And in those years, Morgan Stanley had 3 offices, Tokyo, London, New York. Yeah. When I left in 2007, it was 60,000 people had offices everywhere.
Yeah.
But that was the beginning of globalization. Mm-hmm. So when you think of as a leader of a small business that didn't matter a lot yet, I had people working for me that were Japanese, that were French, that were Swiss, that were Germans. It was an incredible experience, actually, of not being judgmental. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of understanding you need to actually focus on who you're talking to. Uh-huh. And so when we start talking about gender equality, in this country, it's right to focus on that. Mm-hmm. But coming back to my early career, so I started at the same time as my colleague. I co-headed the FX business with Paul Kimball, an amazing guy, still a friend from University of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Yep. I had a Harvard MBA. I was a profitable trader on the desk. They promote him to VP. I'm still an associate.
Wait, are you serious?
Yes. No, it gets better. So I got very upset, but it is what it is. Next year, they promote him to an ED, principal, we used to call it that day. Yeah. I'm still an associate. So I called my ex-husband. And, in life, you need to, when you come to important decisions, get advice. Mm-hmm. So I called him and I said, that's it, I'm quitting. And he said, you can, but... And at that time, as I said, he was at Lehman. It's no better here. You can quit and understand you're not going to have a career in finance. Or Wall Street. You can stay home and take care of the kids, great. But that's the choice you're making. Go to the bathroom, dry, because I was crying, I was upset. Uh-huh. The best advice, make it known that you're not happy and you're not going to accept that. Mm-hmm. And then go do your job. Mm-hmm. So the best advice, we wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't call him and say, that's it, I'm quitting. Uh-huh. And he didn't give me the answer he gave.
Right.
And when you think about how the world has changed, the positives, I'm an optimist by nature. When I went to complain, my boss said, well, your husband has a good job. Yes. So you see how things have changed?
You see our reaction? We were both like...
So you see there's progress in life,
Yes.
Well, your husband has a good job. Oh, my God.
But... when you think about it, and I'll come to the gender issues, but really in terms of opportunity, men versus women, it doesn't matter. The demographics at that time, if you chose the right firm, so you chose the right industry, which is finance, and within that investment banking, not commercial banking. Not Citi, not B of A, investment banking, which was about to change the world. You're getting on an elevator to the moon. Mm-hmm. Overnight rates were 21% on their way to 0. So for me, guys, this is what I mean about a monkey could do what we did, and we were not monkeys. Again, but these are, for me, I'm passionate about that because people mix luck, opportunity. You get a lot of pontificators, some of these names, how they have these great hedge funds and they made...
I was a prophet. Yeah, exactly. I bought a house in, April of 2020. I knew.
And I had, and I had a great team and I let blah, blah, blah. Well, 30-year treasuries risk-free rate of return was 15% on the way to 1.5%. His 60-40, 40-60, it didn't matter.
Yeah, no.
They both went to the moon. Mm-hmm. So for me, the advice I give to people, men and women, choose a growth industry. I don't care if you're raising pigs. Choose a thing that grows. That is what is a lot of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Anything that's growing, they need talent. And if you add value, they don't care if you have 3 heads. So for me, I understood that sales and trading basically was a growth business. I also understood, and I still tell my children that, for me, Morgan Stanley was a very client-centric organization. I understood what mattered to that firm. And then within that, what mattered to my boss. And I tried to make my boss look good because I understood what the metrics were. It's not the organization is going to bend to your belief system.
Yeah.
So coming to the gender issues and why women, I know.
Are you so? Well, no, I also feel like it must be so annoying for you to have to answer this question every time you're interviewed, probably, about
No, it's
like
not actually.
being a woman who was so senior when we just interviewed 2 men and we didn't ask them what it was like for them to be men who were senior. Like, that's not,
But you know, but
we
you
never
see,
asked that question.
No, in fact, it's a very legitimate question. This is, we women sometimes are our own worst enemies. Of course, it's a legitimate, rational question to ask. Why would you ask him? He never had to.
No, yeah. He didn't think about it.
Of course, it's important to ask. And I would say, if you add value, you're a positive force to whatever, whether it's your personal life
Yeah.
or your professional life.
Yeah.
You understand your surrounding. Are you positive addition? Good things will happen. And if you didn't get lucky enough to work with the right people in the right firm, exit.
Yeah.
Just hit the bid, as they say.
Yeah.
But how did you
Reinvent it.
know that you weren't supposed to hit a bid when they were promoting everybody else and telling you your husband had a good job?
And how did you ultimately turn that into, I mean, continuing to rise through the organization? Clearly, obviously, you were very talented, but like, how did that ultimately?
So it's a very good question. My choice, so I work or I don't work.
It was a binary option. And
And even to this day, by the way, when people talk about it's a rich woman's problem, sadly. Do I want to be a good mother or do I want to have a career? That's a false choice. It's a rich people's problem. Blue-collar workers don't think of that way. My mom was come from very modest means. She worked her entire life. She's my hero.
Yeah.
They need to pay the rent. They're not mutually exclusive things. So for me, again, this idea of how did I know? I wanted to work.
Yeah.
And what I found, again, with luck, because as I was making a lot of money for the firm, even they could argue.
Yes, this is,
having P&L next to your name is the greatest gift about this job.
Exactly.
No one can take that away from you.
Exactly. So what I say to women, or any kind of, there are isms, but in the gender issues, we all have isms. We all have actually, what's the word, preconceived ideas. So for me, I think ultimately that it's subconscious. Women are supposed to be the caregivers.
Yeah.
You stay home, or if you're not home, you're going to be mild-mannered, and men are supposed to be the alpha.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the advice I give is if you're an investment banker, there are a lot of soft issues that women have to overcome that they cannot very often because they're not on a golf course playing with the M&A head.
Except me.
Yeah. Exactly. Whereas in trading, any kind of career where there's a number next, where they don't argue with numbers are there's a lot of clarity to them.
Yep.
For me, those are careers you want to have if you're fighting those kind of odds. So I was known as a very big money maker. And on Wall Street, whoever makes the most money gets to run the business. I mean, that's how it works. Second piece of luck was John Mack at that time was running fixed income. And ironically, FX did not report to fixed income at the time. It would report into investment banking, believe it or not. Because the visionary investment banker, the guy running corporate finance at the time, Louis Bernard, decided we do all these M&A deals, multi-billion-dollar M&A deals. FX is a byproduct. Why don't we do it? So he set up the business, and so we report to him. And we started having fights between the derivatives guys in fixed income, reporting into Mac, and FX, and horrible behavior. So John Mack, who was even back then the terror of the group, he calls us into a meeting with my boss, me, and the guy running derivatives, reporting into him. And he begins by saying, you know what? I'm sick and tired, and I can't do his Southern accent, but I am sick and tired of this fighting. I told these guys if they want FX, instead of coming to you, they can go outside. And, the guy started talking about all kinds of bullshit reasons, blah, blah, blah. My boss, of course, is petrified. He's not saying a word. So I said, do you want to hear my side of the story? You made this decision. He looks at me like, who the fuck is this? He couldn't figure out whether he's going to fire me, even though I don't report into him. So he goes, yes, to his credit, I'll hear your side of the story. And then I basically said, this is a byproduct of cross-border transactions. Mm-hmm. The fact that you're going to give the bid offer spread to Citigroup instead of Morgan Stanley, these guys, his behavior, he's taking 100-cent revenue dollars. He doesn't care if he turns them into 50-cent revenue dollars as long as it's in his PN.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He said, let me think about it. The next day, to his credit, he called me. He says, I want to take you out to lunch. Because he understood actually someone that, and he loves the truth.
This is John Max.
Yes. Yeah. John Max.
So that's what turned my career around. Because again, if basically it wasn't for that meeting, for me to say, and again, my advice is have certain principles that you believe in.
Right.
Tell the truth. You'll be fine. If I were not like him, he would have said, never going to do this. And by the way, maybe I would have gotten fired, or maybe my career, or I would have withered in the vine for years. But the luck is John Mack is fearless. Mm-hmm. This is somebody you want on your side. Mm-hmm. He has this principle of integrity. Mm-hmm. And he recognized that in me. I wasn't afraid of him.
Well, and again, what you were saying was, hey, let's do what's best for the firm and not what's best for our ego. Let's keep the bid offer in-house.
Exactly.
That's not exactly like a revolutionary principle.
Exactly.
But those fights are still being fought today, by the way, on every fixed income trading floor, is where do we keep the bid offer in-house?
Every floor.
It's never stopped, right?
But it's not just fixed income. Let's be clear. We're all self-interested human beings. Mm-hmm. We're wired to survive. And in fact, if you manage people, the worst problems is actually where people feel their survivable is threat.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point.
Basically, for me, the luck is this guy called me to lunch and says, I want to hear about you. Mm. He got to know me better. He was one of those guys that said, I want more women in positions of power.
Yeah.
And that's where the luck came in. Mm-hmm. It's not just I was good and I made a lot of money and where is my title?
Yeah.
Right.
Coming back to the gender thing, I became very controversial at Morgan Stanley when I rose to running fixed income, which was the most important division of the firm. I believe in quotas, a certain amount of women coming in, but the reason they're not rising is we lose them as they're going up the rank.
Yep.
Yes.
But quotas are important because ultimately, when you talk about 52% of the gray matter of the world is female, you can't say you're going for talent and exclude 52% of the gray matter.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's easy if you go to Harvard Business School and you interviewing me versus a guy, it's sad, but if I'm exceptional, they'll opt for me. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I'm the exception running Morgan Stanley it hasn't been solved yet. Mm. And I don't know that it will within Wall Street, frankly.
Yeah.
I have views as to how it's going to be changing. I do believe in balance. Having said that, I started hiring even in FX. The sales desk was run by a woman. Mm-hmm. The number one salesperson was a woman. Women make great salespeople.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Because they listen. They don't just talk, then they shut up and listen to the client.
I was like a psychologist for my client. Like, that's what it was, right?
Exactly.
I had 52 instant Bloomberg chats open, and it was just therapy sessions.
And you listen.
So, yeah.
But having said that, so a lot of powerful people on the desk were women. That's a different kind of hell. Because I will tell you this. Again, I believe in balance in nature. Women and men are wired differently, period. No qualifiers. We're more empathetic. I mean, we're supposed to be the mothers. Mm-hmm. So maybe they'll change 100 years down the road. But at the moment, we have the babies. I will give my life for my children.
Yes.
So we're the maternal type. We listen. We're more empathetic with the empaths of the room. But we don't know how to let go. Men, it's actually...
so true.
So men it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
Your win is my loss. but they know how to let go. Because I would say...
It happened, it's over, it's in the past, what's the next thing?
And they like actually move on. Whereas like a woman is like,
on August 12th of 1998, I remember
like Donna Zasman did this like terrible thing to us.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. And I would say to, especially the woman that didn't ultimately make it, I was so tired. She said, another thing. I said, what do you mean another thing? It's done. There is no other thing.
Yeah.
So my point is we need to understand the differences and we need to actually cultivate how you add value to the team.
Yeah.
That takes vision, I think, from the top. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of men, and I'm painting with a very broad brush.
It's never all. Yeah.
I am clear I will not be here. There's a lot of John Macks in the world that are changing the world in their own way. But I feel in organizations where the CEOs and the number 2 and the number 3 are mainly men.
Yep.
These guys in general, their wives don't work. To ask them to think outside the box when their life is actually that construct is very hard to do.
Yeah.
So my advice is figure out what is a growth industry. So from coming back to Wall Street, if you really want to work on Wall Street, there are certain pieces of advice one can give. But frankly, I think if not yesterday's story, it's actually a utility. Wall Street will become a utility where honesty matters, intelligence matters. But the 2, 3, 10, 20 people that will change that company's course, you can count in your 2 hands. I joined a firm where we all build businesses. I mean, we were given enormous opportunities to fail forward.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're conservative, you want to make a lot of money, you want to learn some things for a couple of years. Yeah. But that's not where I would go based on my philosophy, which is what is the new thing?
Right. Yeah.
What is a growth industry? And how can I participate?
And I know that you are obviously in a growth industry right now. And we want to talk about that and touch on that. But 2 quick questions based on everything. Everything you just said was like a speech. We could talk. Yeah, exactly. But talking about what's changing in the industry, one of the number 1 questions we get from our listener base is how is AI going to impact me in the next 1 to 5 years as I think about entering into the financial services industry? And so a lot of people have made the decision, well, hey, go where the growth is. The growth seems to be in AI. So if you can't beat them, join them. Right. And the rest of the people are saying, I don't really understand this Terminator stuff. Is it going to take my job? Right. So I'm curious what your view is on that. And then you said you believe in quotas. You said you believe that we need to do more to get women in the door at the junior levels. Then we need to figure out the problem of why they're not the senior levels. Devil's advocate, one of the things that seems to be an unintended consequence of the hiring policies over the last decade or 2 is that so many women who are exceptionally qualified for the job get derided as, oh, well, she's just the token woman. She's just here because of DEI. She's just here because someone had to hire her.
So if she is, she's not going to make it very...
It gets you like a month on the job.
So if she isn't, who cares?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Why waste the energy? What I say, I believe in quotas. I believe 25% of the class at Harvard Business School, which is a massive pre-filtering exercise with females. Why are the entry class 3%? That's what I mean by quotas. So if it's 25, at the very least, make 25% of them be female.
Yeah.
Well, and the crazy thing is now, I mean, women are graduating at much higher rates than men from college.
There's more entering college.
Yeah, the valedictorians, there are more highly skewed towards women. So from a just on paper,
right,
who has
probably more than 50%.
Yeah.
Like therefore,
But it's, I do think, as we were talking about, as people move up through the industry, it becomes, I think, harder to retain women because we're talking about like just the biological reality. We had a conversation with the trader who was like, I knew I would need to pump, right? And like, how am I going to get off the desk as a trader? Because I need to do that 20 minutes a day, every 3 hours.
How old were your children?
So my son, it was an infant when I started at Morgan Stanley. So coming back to act and consequence, look, I have an amazing relationship with my children. I adore them and they adore me. But I didn't breastfeed. I got back to work. I was doing actually a big FX transaction in the labor room.
Oh my God.
So this idea of you make sacrifices. So I didn't breastfeed. They're perfectly healthy. This idea that you're going to be competing with a guy next to you and you're disappearing to the bathroom as dollar yen is collapsing.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean,
No.
No, I 100% agree. I think that that's the problem, is that there are women who then see that and they're like, all right, well, I'm going to choose, because then it ends up unfortunately becoming a choice. It's like the man next to you whose wife
he doesn't have to make that choice.
He doesn't have to make that choice. But as a mom, you do. And I think nowadays too, there is so much mom shaming that like women get it from all angles.
Well, and I think you're really good at saying like, again, who cares, right? Who cares what they think? Who cares if someone thinks there should be an asterisk next to your name? I think that's a testament to you and your emotional and intellectual fortitude that I think we should all aspire to, right? Like the kind of like, well, what do you care what they say? What do you care what they think? If the numbers are next to your name, what do you care? If your kid's healthy, what do you care what some other person thinks? But we all care so much. Why do we care so much?
Well, I mean, everyone, look, we all as human beings, I would say, need validation. Whether you're a man or a woman, an Indian or American, we need validation. So I say who cares in the sense that I get my validation from people that I know.
The people that matter in your life.
Yes.
Yeah, you had your partner, you've got your kids, like they have all given you the validation. You don't care what some stranger on the internet thinks, which is unfortunately now, you're talking about kids coming up through the industry these days. That is not necessarily the support network that they have. They don't necessarily have that really strong community around them of their peers, their teachers, their community leaders, their parents, their extended family. They're alone in a room with a phone. And it's the number of likes that they get on a post. And again, as people who are on social media, we have gotten into social media because that's where these people are. And to reach them there, we otherwise never would have chosen that vehicle because of the nature of this, right?
But these things that we're talking, these are micro issues in the sense that as long as you have structured a world where your children, because again, the worst sin you can commit is have these kids. Don't have them. Have these kids and just, leave them. All my vacations with my children. Yeah. The nice thing about trading, at 5 o'clock, I went home. Yeah. So there's a minimum amount of time. Yeah. But all these other micro issues, as long as you actually feel secure in the fact that you're not damaging your family, your friends, or your team, I think we women, and actually, again, the isms, people become victims. And the worst thing you can do as a human being, think as a victim.
1,000%.
So people start treating you differently.
Yep. Well, and I think people start to act differently. You lose the drive and the confidence and the perseverance because it's like, again, it's all about the mentality. Like mentality is, in my opinion, 90% of everything.
So
okay, so talk to us now. So sorry. We had asked about kind of the role of AI, and I know so you've been through many additional careers since your time at Morgan Stanley, but I'd like to talk about what you're doing now. Obviously, making inroads in the decentralized finance space. Yes. Like this is something that we are still just learning about that is so foreign to me. For someone who literally built the FX business at Morgan Stanley, so like the most traditional of the traditional businesses that we now think of being set in stone, to someone who's now pioneering in the decentralized finance space. Can you talk to us about what that transition has been like and how you decided that that was the avenue to pursue, that that's where the growth was happening and that was the next big thing?
Exactly. My answer relates to the question you asked about AI. Where is it going? None of us know.
Yeah. That's always the answer. We ask this question all the time. Like, no one knows.
In fact, I would say I've been around a lot since the world began to globalize. All those things that actually made finance work. Interest rates, the cost of capital was going down. Availability of it was going up. The friction of movement of goods and capital was collapsing, so globalizing. You had an enormous opportunity and things were changing, but always for the better. All of that is going in reverse, which means the cost of capital is going up. I'm a big believer in inflation. We're not going to see 2% in my life.
You think?
Unless things go really bad. You mean 2% inflation or 2% rates again?
2% inflation, which means neither you're going to see 2% inflation.
2% rates either.
So the cost of capital will continue to go up and availability of it will continue to go down. Because the last few years we had growth through leverage. The U.S. government went from a primary surplus to $34 trillion worth of debt. The cost of servicing that debt is $1 trillion every 12 months. And we have 2 old men, shame on this country, 2 old guys. Their budget is going to be $2 trillion. they're going to spend it differently. They're going to add another 2 trillion to 34. The cost of capital will not go down. We've had growth through leverage. We all know how the movie ends. If you basically go back to the Weimar Republic, when the Deutschmark in the 30s was okay, and then it was less okay. And then we know. So what they're going to do is choose hyperinflation. They're going to choose to inflate the way, not hyper.
Oh my God, I need a drink. We're talking about the Weimar Republic the next few years.
Yeah, so I'll come back because I am the exception in the sense that we're not entertaining enough stress testing. So conventional wisdom is, and by the way, probabilistically speaking, conventional wisdom is right. Conventional wisdom is they've achieved soft landing. You know, interest rates will go maybe sideways and then down because the Fed is going to ease. And therefore, stocks and bonds are a good thing. You should invest. That's conventional wisdom. And again, probabilistically speaking, that's a scenario perfectly reasonable. But in today's world, that means all of that is incorporated in the asset values.
It's priced in. Yeah.
So the asymmetry of risk reward, to ask you why I got into this space, is if you do everything right as a fund manager, and as I say to people running billions of dollars, I don't envy their job. If you do everything right, maybe you'll make 10 to 15% per annum. If my scenario is right, where we are at a huge inflection, that you can't keep on adding debt at these levels, and the reason we're not seeing the consequences, we are a reserve currency.
Right. Yep.
Argentine peso went down 98%, Turkish lira 60%. We know how those movies end.
Yeah. Yes.
So for me, there is not enough entertaining of, in the current construct, something different has to happen.
Yeah.
Or you read history, it's basically cycles. You have amazing growth, plateau, collapse, tabula rasa, we start all over again.
Yeah.
Not the end of the world. 2008 was the first crisis we didn't have tabula rasa. We just kept on pumping. And with COVID, we just kept
propping it up.
Yep.
I believe that we all learn to cope with issues. My biggest worry is we're not giving the young generation who understands technology enough say in politics to have a heptogenarian 77 and 81-year-old man, forget the character of those two gentlemen. They don't understand. You talk about AI. If I don't understand AI,
I don't understand it.
most importantly, they don't understand the demographic that's under 40 years old.
Right.
And so I believe the fact that blockchain technology, it's a foundational technology. Traditional guys look at it, it'll save a lot of money, cheaper, faster. All that is wonderful. The true revolution, in my view, and again, it's wonderful what traditional finance is spending billions of dollars to do in that space. And I'll come back to AI, but the space I occupy, what I'm excited about is tokens, those cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is one use case, which is digital gold.
Yep.
If I think inflation goes up, my generation buys gold. My 27-year-old buys Bitcoin.
Buys Bitcoin. Yep.
But it's the same use case.
Yep.
Yeah.
But tokens, the new thing is token. If I buy Ethereum or I buy Solana, Sol, I buy any of those tokens that actually point to a project that solves a problem, that creates hundreds of millions of users around the world, that token will be valuable because it's an equity call to a network. So Ethereum, let's take Ethereum. It is mind-boggling how many applications are being written on that platform that will change many, many business models. Ethereum, being that network that was this big and now it's massive, it collects pennies, if you will, or dollars for if you're going to be on their network. So if I own Ethereum, I have an equity call to that revenue. In the first 7 years of their life, they made $10 billion in revenue. The only company that beat them was Alphabet.
Wow.
So this is actually not only foundational and changing the world, it will be very, very profitable and very, very valuable going forward. So it's $1.7 trillion asset class. You can't ignore $1.7 trillion, but most importantly, it will be 10 trillion and 20 trillion. But what I'm excited about is you and I can exchange value, not just money, value without a bank account. I have a wallet, you have a wallet. a phone. That's what we need. And basically, this technology and the fact that I have a token, I can give it to you instantaneously, changes the content. Right now, you have a lot of intermediaries. If you're a journalist, if you're a musician, whatever you are, I'm a content provider. You're the buyer. We have somebody in the middle collecting a lot of money.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so that's an amazing revolution. It's early. A lot of projects will die. But the ones that will not die, that are being built, it will be the most exciting thing and most positive thing that we can do as an industry. And I'm a big believer we need to pay a lot more attention to doing responsible things like having integrity. Believe regulators when they say they're not compromising on investor protection. You're not going to say, I'm changing the world, so let me commit fraud.
Right.
Investor protection, AML, KYC, they're not going to compromise on that. So as an industry, these young people have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
But it is the most exciting thing that will add enormous value to the world. And the oligopoly, which I used to be part of, people say, Zoe, the SWIFT system, correspondent banking system, I can send money all over the world. It works just fine. Yes, if a Morgan Stanley sending $1 billion to Citi, if you're an SME in, I use Nigeria or Kenya, not so good. Never mind if you're a basket weaver in Nigeria. Right? You're a basket weaver in Nigeria. The technology exists. I can send you money instantaneously, and you can sell me those things. And so it's not just you have access to a world that you didn't have access to. It is actually micropayments. Because at Morgan Stanley, Ellen Brownsberg, I don't know if you remember her, I supported this thing for micropayments because the have-nots don't have access. For the current system, it's very hard to do transactions for $1. It's not worth it, so you don't do it. So that's why I'm in the space. On the AI thing, I actually think that if it had better rails, and we better develop those rails, it is something that in the history of humanity, we won't know the outcome until hopefully it's not too late. So let's say it's the positive thing, which is, and I did download, by the way, both Perplexity and ChatGPT.
Oh boy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I ask it questions in seconds. Amazing. Now, if I Google for an hour, I can get it. It's incredible. So the positive thing about AI is I now have an assistant that I couldn't afford, even if I'm a plumber. I can have an assistant. They can tell me what, amazing. But for me, if you say, therefore, white-collar jobs are going to be eliminated by the millions, that's a good thing if you had a construct that knew what to do with unemployment, massive unemployment. So the financial system and the social system is not ready for AI.
And not only that, and what people want to do. Like, people don't want to be unemployed even if they're getting money.
Just like human nature too. Think about, I'm thinking about the conversation that you have with John Mack that you described as such a turning point in your career, right? Where he said, tell me your side of the story. Then he took you out to lunch the next day. And all of the human touch points in that, right? Then you tell me about looking up an answer on ChatGPT. And you said it would take you 10 hours to Google it, right? Well, when you're Googling it and you're filtering through all of those, there's an organic process happening in your mind, right? Of you saying, this is not true, this is not true, this is not right, this isn't the right thing. And then you chose what you believed to be the right answer based on your entire framework of ethics that is different from maybe what Kristen's would have been or what mine would have been. We're getting the truth fed to us by a system that we have implicitly bought into that we are not running. I don't trust that. And I think that's so dangerous. And I think all of the turning points that you've talked about how businesses are built, about how careers are built, about how people grow and develop, to me, it's so dangerous to shortcut all of that conversation by saying, well, this robot, this machine told me the answer.
That's a great point, actually. I think that's spot on. So to basically bring it to the young people, should they be involved, my advice is go to traditional finance, but within that, if you want to stay in finance, within that, let's say BlackRock has a digital asset space. That's traditional finance. You're within, that's maybe a behemoth, but there are smaller,
Galaxy,
medium-sized
whatever
companies.
it may be,
because you need to be trained. You need to learn as a young person, but go to the areas where that's what they do.
Yeah.
That's my advice. And for example, AI, all of the companies are actually spending a lot of money on AI to reposition their business model.
Yeah.
Go to that part of it.
Yeah.
Don't go to structured credit business or the new thing, private credit.
We just talked to Ty. We were like, what's private credit?
Yeah.
Everyone says it's so sexy. He's like, no one knows what private credit is. It means 10 different things to 10 different people.
But you know what? It's yesterday's story.
Really?
Well, I mean, what I mean by that is it will continue to add value.
Yeah.
But it's actually reaggregating. What is private credit? Is basically fixed income security. The fact that Apollo does it instead of Morgan Stanley is incidental. Is that interesting?
It's just what's old is new again.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, and listen, Wall Street's done a great job of continually reinventing itself over the years, of finding more complex ways to do transactions that, I read my kids the Dr. Seuss book, 1 cent, 2 cent, old cents, new cents. And they talk about old systems of bartering and exchange. All we've done is package it differently and made it more complex, but it's all the same thing over and over again. Okay, but what's something that's totally disrupting the way that that's been conceived of in the established financial sector? And I do think it's the decentralized finance space. I don't think it's in those. I think there's still plenty of money to be made. Don't get me wrong.
And experience, like
And the other final point about where young people should go, I think risk management. At Morgan Stanley, when it grew so big globally, we had $1 trillion balance sheet. I had a guy that came in from my executive team to do scenario planning. Scenario planning was born by Shell or BP, big oil companies, that said, you know what, there's the axis, the 4 quadrants. If oil prices keep on going up, we're going to be multi-billionaires. If oil prices collapse, what does our company look like? Stress testing your assumptions. And I believe every business, whether it's Wall Street, hedge funds, understanding and stressing your basic assumptions. So if your assumption is inflation is actually not going up, that's perfectly legitimate. There's reasons why. But if it's wrong, and you stress test your business model and you're bankrupt, whatever it is you're doing, it's too much. So I think risk management and having an understanding how risk scenarios work and risk management and having mitigants for that is going to be a huge area.
Oh, I think that's a really interesting perspective. Have you ever seen World War Z? The zombie movie?
No.
So basically,
I don't like thrillers. But anyway,
I like sci-fi. But so there's this one scene where, zombies are taking over the world, whatever. And everyone flees to, I forget which country it was. And they've built a giant wall. And they're like, well, how'd you build this wall? Did you know the zombies were coming? And they were like, no. But we had this policy internally that if everyone sits around in the room and comes up with, okay, what's the one scenario we're not prepared for, right? And how do we make some investment to prepare for it? And I guess it was zombies coming over the wall and they built some wall. But it's that whole thing, right? Of, well, if everyone's sitting around the table and you're like, hey, if this one thing happens, we are totally effed and we have invested 0 in this. I think that's a really important thing. And to continue to air all theses out in the most competitive and rigorous analysis.
Rigorous.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there'll be many advisory firms that will be cropping up because, again, I've been around the markets for a long, long time. This is as big an inflection as I've ever seen.
Really?
And inflection points create binary outcomes. So it's a good field to be in.
We've talked about, obviously, your exit out of the traditional finance space. Now, can you talk about how exactly you're expressing this at Menai, which is the current vehicle that you're obviously at the helm of?
So my vision, actually, in the long run, is to create the Morgan Stanley of the digital asset space. Not the Goliath it became today, but the Morgan Stanley that began here and dominated global finance. So for me, this asset space is a Cambrian explosion, as I said.
Oh, I like that.
And I'm right now, the vision thing is wonderful to see the size of opportunity and the amazing incoming CVs I get for a tiny little company is incredible.
That's so cool. And after this, you're going to get a bunch more.
Very exciting. But I also believe Rome wasn't built in a day. People ask me, by the way, how did you get to where you got to run Morgan Stanley? I said, quarter of a century of hard work every single day. It doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
So the vision thing is important. But right now we have basically 2 funds, long only. And both of them are structured pretty similarly. We call it the barbell approach. One fund is the large cap, the current winners in the space.
Okay.
And then the smaller, the opportunity fund, is the future winners of the space. We call it a giant scanning screen into the future.
Oh.
And so the reason I chose long only and forcing diversification, because it's way too early to call winners and losers.
Yeah.
The use cases, as I said, Bitcoin sucks the air out of the room. It's the least interesting use case.
Right.
I do think Bitcoin, 30% of our portfolio is in Bitcoin. It is a winner if you're talking about an easier way to store value. You know, as I said, my 27-year-old buys Bitcoin, I buy gold.
Yes.
That is a generational thing. And it will go up a lot. But ultimately, people don't realize Solana was up 1,300% last year. 1,300%. Do you know why? This is what I mean about diversifying. So Solana is basically a platform like Ethereum. It's a platform on which you can actually
build
a
like
lot
the
of
layer
things.
2 economies. Yeah.
It's very important to know who your client is. Who are you solving a problem for?
Yep.
Solana said, I'm going to let you trade faster, cheaper than Ethereum.
Yep.
Their volumes have gone up by billions of dollars because meme coin trading has gone through the roof. The most amazing thing that happens right underneath our nose, the rate of change and build out is mind-boggling. So when I think about Solana, that you've never heard of until a year ago, out of the blue, it is making billions of dollars of revenue. Because it's catering, it knows who it's catering to. These young people that will continue to gamble. But the positive thing about, as opposed to kind of pontificate gambling is not a good thing, that young person learns how to invest and trade, not through JP Morgan and the private banking world. They're doing it themselves. They have a social media network and they buy this and they sell that. So 5 years from now, he will not be using the wealth services of, you know, I will, not them. So we force diversification because we say it's too early to call winners and losers. My favorite example, which I give all the time, is social media was up and coming, the new thing, a decade or two ago. MySpace had 90% market share, Facebook 5%. You needed to own both. We're not, right now, we're not smart enough to call winners. So our strategy is idiosyncratic risk is never a good idea. Invest in things that are real. They're solving real cases, real needs. You have a great group of, who are the coders? Who is the team? Vitalik, you wanted to invest in, basically. And people forget, they love to poo-poo on this space.
Because they don't understand
At the end of the day, Ethereum went from proof of work to proof of stake. Do you know how massive that is? It's like flying a 747 and fixing it at the same time. They did it. They did it. This is an engineering feat. I'm not an engineer. They say it is unbelievable, flawless. So for me, diversification matters. We do deep research to each one of those tokens, and we put on our funds tokens that we think will actually have a network effect. That will grow exponentially. And just like you needed to buy the Bezos dream, not because he had a great logistics company, his network effect. Facebook. I mean, Facebook is value because, so that's basically our philosophy is zero allocation to the space is the wrong answer. What we say to the world, give it to the adults in the room. I also believe, because when I look at my Morgan Stanley days, the way I managed people is I talked to everyone. I asked questions of everyone, including the most junior, youngest person on the desk. By the time I got practically to the cleaning lady, I had an incredible cornucopia of ideas. And so that's our thesis is you have to listen to the young people, but my young people actually listen to, we need to have operational excellence. because permanent loss you don't come back from. Mark-to-market loss you do. So we have all the ethos of the traditional asset space, but I am not a Warren Buffett that says this is nothing.
Yeah.
I believe this is something,
I
and we
love
should
that.
listen to
Oh, that
young
is so
people.
inspiring. Well, thank you so much. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to The Wall Street Skinny. We are more than just a podcast, so follow us on TikTok and Instagram at The Wall Street Skinny. If you're a visual learner, we have content that will help get you up the curve from valuation to Excel to bond fundamentals 101. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel where we will be publishing in-depth tutorials on all this and more.